Tassā bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ gunuttarāṃ uppaccayaṃ nammasāmi. Yesterday I spoke a little about Metta and the attitude, the unlimited, unmeasured acceptance, absolute acceptance of Metta, and the practice with pain and painful feeling is one in which we can apply that Metta balm, that Metta medicine. So to recap one point I made in the question and answer session, that formula of pain multiplied by resistance equals suffering. So we can go through the variables there. You have a lot of pain and a lot of resistance, and you have really a lot of suffering. You have a lot of pain but little resistance, and you have much less suffering. Or if you have little pain and a lot of resistance, you have a lot of suffering. Little pain, little suffering, little pain and little resistance, then not so much suffering. So in the absence of resistance, complete acceptance, or Metta, then pain multiplied by zero resistance is zero suffering. So the point here being that pain is possible to experience pain without suffering. So you can take the suffering out of experience, but no, you can't always take pain out of experience, because some people think that you practice Dhamma, then it cure you of all your illnesses. Well, no, I don't think that's the case. But it can cure you or can deal with a lot of suffering that arises as a consequence or accompanying that illness. So again, we start off with observation. What can we observe about pain? And we can observe that the suffering of pain is not stable. It's impermanent. It changes. So that's the anicca insight. And then we say, well, why does it change? It changes because of causes and conditions. Is that correct? What are the causes and conditions? Why is it, for example, that different people with the same kind of illness, or say in the case of cancer in the same organ at the same degree, the same stage of cancer, and yet one person might suffer terribly and another person suffer not so much. It's clear that it's not solely a physiological issue. And so now we look, even in one person, you might at certain periods, at certain times, a lot of suffering, and other times not so much suffering. What are the factors affecting that? This is how we conduct this Buddhist analysis. The factors, the change, when things become more intense, when they become less intense, if they disappear temporarily, what does it feel like when there is suffering? What does it feel like when there's no suffering? Constantly examining in this way, not in an intellectual way, but it's a close observation. So this formula of pain and resistance, what are we talking about in resistance? The more technical term, the Pali term we might use is vibhava tanha. So there's three kinds of craving. And craving are the desires that arise naturally, inevitably from ignorance. So you don't have to fight craving, you deal with its root. So when you can replace avijja or ignorance with vijja, then the root of craving is destroyed, and so the craving cannot arise. But with avijja, when we say ignorance, what are we talking about? What are we ignorant of? It's not ignorant of information about this and that. It's ignorant of the Four Noble Truths. And avijja is absence of true understanding, a distorted view. Because when there is no true understanding, it's like a vacuum. You can't have an absence of vijja, and only you have a false understanding arises. It fills up the vacuum. It's just like miccha ditthi. So resistance is a function of vibhava tanha, one of the three kinds of craving which arise when we don't understand the body and the mind. We don't understand the five khandhas. The Buddha said, essentially, dukkha is the five khandhas. Five khandhas is, we can't know anything else except the five khandhas. That's all we can ever know. So the resistance, or the vibhava tanha, is this immediate, instinctive resistance. I don't want this. Go away. I don't need this right now. Why me? And pain can immediately sort of plug us into all these kind of narratives and stories about ourselves and past pain. So with trauma and so on, so present pain can just plug you into this whole pain circuitry, pain habit. So what can you do about it? This is very difficult, isn't it? It's just so immediate and so spontaneous that for non-meditators, then it's hard even to understand how there could be a distinction between the physical and the physiological and the mental dimensions of pain. But then we can bring up some very simple examples. Why is it that, for example, when we're absorbed into some activity, let's say watching a movie or something, you could sit for, binge watching a movie or something like hours. So why is your body not giving you the same suffering as it would if you were sitting on a meditation hall? Because your mind's elsewhere. So this is clear demonstration, isn't it, of the role that the mind plays. So if there's the fear, anxiety, aversion, all of these different reactions and the stories, all our individual stories about who we are and what this means to us, because we're always interpreting things that happen. We're meaning-seeking, pattern-seeking creatures, and we find some meaning in what's going on. And sometimes it's not a very healthy meaning, distorted meaning. So this whole cluster of very powerful, strong reactions to physical pain, the identifying the commonality of them is they're all resisting, they're all non-acceptance of the situation. So this is why Metta is the antidote. Metta is total acceptance, and Vipawa Tanha is absolute non-acceptance. They're polar opposites. So bringing this sense of acceptance and metta to physical pain, it's all right. Remember years ago, many years ago, in Wat Nanachat, when there was a period where we were having Christian priests and seminarians coming and spending time as bhakkhals in the monastery and keeping precepts and practicing. And one man in particular, he had he was having a lot of problems sitting on the floor and not used to that at all. A lot of resistance, and spoke to him about this idea of, substituting non-resistance for resistance and metta and acceptance. And so, being Christian, he was very skillful. He had this, of course he brought to mind Jesus and this absolute acceptance of the pain of crucifixion. So he identified with Jesus as a skillful means, a skillful creating this new kind of narrative, a story, and following in. He says, "Please, yes, I accept this. Just as Jesus accepted it, I accept it." So this is for me, this is a skillful means, whether or not you believe in the Jesus story, but it's a story that you can adapt to a very effective way. In the Buddhist tradition, it can be the bodhisattva, one who accepts pain on behalf of others. And you can, as a Buddhist, you think that all of the suffering beings in the world, so much suffering in the world, horrible, terrific suffering, may I accept that suffering in their place, may I suffer in their place. Again, it's a way of turning that resistance on its head. It's rather than saying, I don't want this, I don't need this, and find this threatening and overwhelming and frightening, and you say, yeah, give me more. It's like, yeah. Is that all you got? Now this is this is a remarkable thing to observe, and because we all experience pain in our life. We're not, Buddhist. What's on our Buddhist bucket list? The two things to experience before we die: old age and sickness. That's two things as Buddhists we're going to experience before we die, for sure. So that's going to involve pain, for sure, to one degree or another. And this is the dukkha nature of existence. It's not life is dukkha, but life involves dukkha. Life is inseparable from dukkha. And in the sense of physical discomfort, physical pain, as we get old, and we have sicknesses. Therefore, we need strategies to deal with it. We need to prepare for it. And fear of pain is always bubbling below the surface for most people, and you don't really realize it. And then when you analyze certain choices you made, and behind that choice is often fear of pain. It might be fear of physical pain, or it might be fear of mental pain, and fear of discomfort. Fear of mental pain is like not wanting to do something because you might fail, and then how would that feel? Or if people knew you failed, how would that change how people looked at you? So you have this like proliferation about possible pain in the future, and often that's even without fully realizing it. Sometimes that's the pros and cons. What tips you over into one path or another is often this fear of pain, fear of future pain, and so being willing to face up to pain. And there's not something wrong with the world. There's pain. I mean, this is it. This is the world. There is pain. So the first noble truth is there is pain. There is suffering. It's just part of it. So just a small distinction here is sometimes confusion. So here I'm not talking about pain and suffering in the Four Noble Truths so much as pain and suffering as in the three characteristics of existence. So there's a difference here. Nevertheless, to recognize to what extent pain and the prospect of pain plays in our minds, realizing that this gives us the interest and the willingness to look into pain, and so the physical pain is coarser, can be very severe, but it helps us also to deal with mental pain. We become, there's more equanimity arises in the mind. And if you have this experience of being with pain and then applying this absolute acceptance and metta, and there are various techniques that you can employ to affect this. For example, using the breath and imagining. So using the power of imagining. And imagining metta as like this cool, soothing breeze or a caress on the painful part of the body. So you're breathing through the pain. Of course, your breath is coming in and out of your nostrils, but you can project that. You can imagine this breathing this total acceptance into the in and out through that area of pain. And the pain there will be, it's not going to make the pain disappear because it has a physiological base. But the toxic side of it, the poison on the arrow, is what you can extract. The arrow itself, that's part of nature. And realizing what a huge difference there is between pain and pain multiplied by resistance. And this is like feel a huge weight off your shoulders. And then when you consider what's going to happen in the future, the anxiety about illness and sickness and so on, it takes away so much of that fear and anxiety. So it's such a important part of practice. We're coming back to this idea of meditation as, it's not this kind of special thing, it's like technique in order to achieve something, as much as being willing to spend time with, life. What's this all about? And what's a good way to spend this time we have on earth? And what causes suffering and what reduces suffering, what eliminates suffering, how things work. There's a curiosity in practice. It's really curious about this body and mind. And when you see things clearly, there's a joy in that, isn't there? It's not a joy of acquiring something. It's, oh yes, that's so true. Yeah, it's like that. Oh yes, if I do this, it has that result. And then you just, the Buddha is so wise, and the Buddha's like the doctor, and the Sangha, the great mother, like the nurses, and they say, oh, what wonderful doctor I have, oh, what wonderful nurses I have, and they give me this advice, and when I follow it, it's exactly what they say. Wow, it's incredible. But this is still, on the mundane level, okay? So there's a lot to be learnt from that, and you can see, well, if that pain is conditioned by resistance and can be reduced or eliminated by non-resistance, then how could it be self or belong to self? And so you can have some insight into the anatta nature of existence. But another mode of practice is investigating the pain itself, and the aspects of pain which are very productive. Or one is the nature of the pain. In terms, there's so many different kinds of pain, aren't there? There's the kind of like hot, kind of burning pain, and kind of this sort of drilling pain. So many, and distinguishing between the different kinds of pain, and seeing how that it's not stable within a painful area. And you say, I experience pain so much, all day or for hours. But the actual nature of the pain is not stable. And the location of the pain. So, I have pain in my knee, or pain here and pain there. Well, be more precise. Exactly where in the knee. Is it permanent or impermanent? No, it's not permanent. It's changing. And the intensity of the pain. And as we're aware of, pain tends to come in waves, doesn't it? It builds up to a crescendo, and then it passes away, and then gradually come another wave. So here we can be investigating impermanence and dukkha and anatta in a very profound way by looking at the pain itself and seeing that we give this label of pain, but that word is referring to a complex, changing, ever-changing flow of phenomena. And so we can deconstruct that pain. And again, this is wonderful discovery that we can do that. And just reducing, it's like, oh yeah, I've got tools that I can use, And this is, again, reminds me of the Buddha's teaching before his parinibbana. It's like the last words of advice he gave us. Everything is changing, nothing is stable. So that's the first. Yesterday I spoke about the two kinds of teaching. The first kind of teaching is a statement about the way things are. This is what's called Majjena Desana, Dhamma Desana. It's like, things are like this. That's the first kind of teaching. And then the second kind of teaching is, therefore, a wise person should do this, or this is how we should relate to that truth. So it's this the practical implications, consequences, and application of that truth. So in the last teaching the Buddha gave, he said, all things are unstable, impermanent, and so on. Therefore, you should train yourself, you should cultivate, you should perfect yourself in heedfulness. So we're back into the subject of language again, and like heedfulness is not a word that anybody uses outside of Buddhist discourse. The word is appamada, and so pamada is heedlessness, and the root of that is mada, which means like intoxication, drunkenness. So it's pamada means that kind of heedless, intoxicated, lack of sense of what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad, and just this blindness. One of another translation of this is complacency, to being complacent, taking things for granted, doing things in a robotic, thoughtless kind, living your life without stopping and reflecting and considering what really you're doing, what's going on. And so one of the reflections we have, the days and nights are relentlessly passing. What am I doing right now? That's a reflection to bring up heedfulness, a recognition of the value of our life. This is why we do the maranasati. We have no guarantees. Tomorrow and next life, which comes first? Who knows? How much time do we have left? Who knows? We're going to die, but we don't know when, and we don't know how. So this is, we're bringing it, we're not relying on beliefs, but we're opening the mind up to the truths of life in such a way that they change us. So we are changed by these reflections. And we see, life is really valuable, how long are we going to be with our loved ones? No guarantees at all. And so then, other thoughts. You think about how sometimes you can go in a sulk or not talk to someone you love for like hours on end, or days even sometimes, and yeah, I mean, if we were a deva and you have a life of like millions of years, like a 24-hour, 36-hour sulk is absolutely nothing in a big picture. But we're not. We're human beings, and we could, we don't know what's going to happen even after the next breath. So in Buddha Dhamma, we do this. We don't sort of adopt these beliefs and dogmas, but we open the mind up to truths, and we see what happens. Because if you open your mind up to a truth and nothing happens, that means you're pretty well aligned with truth already. But if you reflect on something, you say, "Oh yeah, wow," whew. And it probably means you're heedless. You've forgotten. It's true. So it's remembering, bringing to mind, bearing in mind these truths of life. So the Buddha says we cultivate this heedfulness, and another way of talking about this, to say readiness. So we live in this world where there's so much to encourage us or incline us to feel anxiety. So many things in the world today, the prospects of the world falling apart because of climate change or political changes that are going in, nuclear war and this and that, and how do you protect yourself? How do you protect your loved ones? How can you control the world to make it livable? And so the Buddha's answer is, you can't, but you make yourself as ready as you can, and you develop these inner resources to the extent you say, well, I can't control, I can't predict what's going to happen, but I have the resources to be able to deal with whatever life will throw at me. That's the kind of confidence, and that's the way that you can find some equanimity and peace. You can't find peace in setting things up and controlling things, even with with wealth and material prosperity and all these things. They can't guarantee anything at all. But when you have a strength of mind and a clarity of mind, and you know how to deal with whatever happens, because whatever happens, if you have to summarize whatever's going to happen in the world, in the future, there are 5 things. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. That's all that will ever happen to you in your life, or any life. You see? Because that's all you can experience as a human being. Is form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. So if you study these things and you observe these things and you know how to manage these things and deal with these things and how to protect the mind from unwholesome dhammas and abandon those that have risen, and to how to bring wholesome dhammas into the mind and cultivate them, then there's a confidence there. It's not a foolish confidence, but it's I have the tools I need. So let's say there's climate breakdown, Bangkok's flooded, or nuclear war, tsunami, everyone has to move to Udon Thani or somewhere in northeast Thailand and escape the disaster. But what would you actually be experiencing, moment by moment? You'd be experiencing your physical body. You have feelings, either pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or neutral feeling. You'd have memories, you have thoughts, emotions, forms, sounds. It's the same old stuff, again, again, again. There's nothing else outside the five khandhas. And we learn, so this is why we learn the five khandhas and, whatever comes. That's heedfulness that we have. That's the equanimity that we have. To learning how to take care of the mind. And so these two main kinds of strategies, we could say. There's a strategy of dealing with negativity through a considered and intelligent application of wholesome dhammas that directly oppose them. So this vipavadanha and resistance and refusal to accept and fighting against the truth of things, and then we say, we'll consciously cultivate thoughts that directly oppose that. Complete acceptance, metta. So that's one kind of strategy, the replacement strategy. But it's not an ultimate letting go and liberation. But it's a very useful life skill. But ultimately, the freedom comes from the wisdom and clearly or seeing and understanding change and dukkha and anatta, constantly inclining the mind and opening the mind to those three characteristics. One of the questions on meditation is, how do you know if your meditation is progressing, and how do you know whether that was like sama samadhi or miccha samadhi? Some people want to sit like this for hours on end, and there's a blissful look on their face. You start to feel a bit jealous, but it's it's not sure. I mean, some people can go into this kind of still state, but there's no awareness, there's no Buddha knowing there. And so how can you recognize that, whether or not there has been that kind of awareness? And because you can fool yourself and think that there was when there wasn't. And one of the very simple measures of this is how the mind feels when you come out of that state. So if it's been this kind of stiff, this is one like that, miccha samadhi, there's a kind of a stiffness, an inflexibility to it. And when you come out of it, it's a bit like you've just had a nap. You've had a rest. You feel that kind of refreshment. But if you come out of a state of sama samadhi, the mind is alive and awake and sensitive to the three characteristics. It's a learning mind. It's a mind which is ready to recognize and be impressed by anicca, impermanence, and dukkha anatta. So many of the great figures in the time of the Buddha, Theras and Theris, the monks and nuns, and many of them wrote poems, and short enlightenment verses were gathered together in the Theragatha and Therigatha. And so many of them realized the Dhamma outside of the formal meditation practice. But without the formal meditation practice, they wouldn't have had the resources or the readiness or the maturity to do that. So these two things always going together. So we're learning, and we're observing, and we're applying the teachings, and we're seeing what happens, and we see where we're still falling short, and we don't be discouraged by that. Just we need to do a bit more work on that part, and don't think that this is okay now, because if you don't look after it, then you'll lose it. If you don't use it, you'll lose it, and just keep working away. So that's the Dhamma talk this evening.
Namayang namakatha sadhu karang dathamase sadhu 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 anumodami.
So what was the page number for Imina? Imina cha 30? 30. Okay. Andamayang utisena ditana gatayom hanamase imina punya kamena upacaya gunutara acariyo pakaraja mata pita jayataka Suryo Chandi Maharaja Gunawanta Narapicha Bahara Indraja Lokapalacha Devata Mita Manusacha Majata Verika Picha Sata Sukhi Hontu Unyani pakata nime Sukhanchati vedang tento Kipang papeta o matang Hina punya kamena Himena utisena cha Kipahang abedewa Amhukathana cetanang Santane hina dhamma Madhikanato mamang Nasantu sabhadayewa Yata jato bhave bhave Ujo citang satipanya Saleko viriyam mina Tuno kasang Katun cawiriye sume Uddhati pawaronato Mohammato warutamo To paceka putto ca Ato taro mamang Teso tamadubhavena Marokasang labantuma. Now let's just chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. The goodness that arises from my practice, my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, mother and father and my relatives, the sun and the moon, all virtuous leaders of the world, his gods and evil forces, celestial beings, spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, beings receive the blessing of my life. They soon attain the threefold bliss, realize the deathless, goodness that arises from my practice. Through this act of sharing, desires and attachments quickly cease, all harmful states of mind, till I realize Nibbana, every kind of life. May I have an upright mind, mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of illusion not take hold, weaken my resolve. Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. Solitary Buddha is my noble Lord. He is my supreme support. The supreme power of all these, darkness and delusion be dispelled. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suwakato Bhagavata Namo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami.
Ground.